So what we are going to be learning on this video is a little bit more about fractions as tenths and hundredths. We worked on this last time we were in class, and I just want to review a little bit before we move on to the next lesson. So what we worked on was writing tenths and hundredths as equivalent fractions. For example, here's a problem that we did in class. 4 tenths is equivalent to how many hundredths? Well, if you remember, step number 1 is we need to figure out how we get from 10 to 100. What do we need to do to this 10? Well, I know to get from 10 to 100, I need to multiply by 10. I also know that whatever we do to the bottom, we also have to do to the top. So 4 times 10 gives me 40, and here are my equivalent fractions. 4 tenths is equivalent to 40 hundredths. So now we're going to do another one, just for another extra review. I'm going to go with 7 tenths is equivalent to how many hundredths? Well, step number 1, to get from 10 to 100, I know that I need to multiply by 10. Whatever I do to the bottom, I also need to do to the top, and I know that 7 times 10 gives me 70. So here are my two equivalent fractions. 7 tenths is equivalent to 70 hundredths. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go back the other way. We're just going to do the very opposite, where I'm going to give you the hundredths and you're going to have to figure out the tenths. So first we're going to do how many tenths is equivalent to 90 hundredths. So this might seem a little bit tricky, but we're actually going to do the same exact step. First thing I need to know is how do I get from 100 to 10? I know to get from 100 to 10, I actually need to divide by 10. Whatever I do to the bottom, I also have to do to the top. 90 divided by 10 gives me 9. So here are my equivalent fractions. 9 tenths is equivalent to 90 hundredths. And we'll do one more just as a good refresher. Bear with me with my little eraser here. How many tenths is equivalent to, let's go with 20 hundredths? Well, step number 1, I need to figure out how to get from 100 to 10. And I know that to get from 100 to 10, I need to divide by 10. Whatever I do to the bottom, I also have to do to the top. If I divide 20 by 10, I get 2. So here are my equivalent fractions. 2 tenths is equivalent to 20 hundredths. Okay, so now that we know how to write equivalent fractions as tenths and hundredths, we can actually start adding. So I'm going to give you an example. We're going to add 2 tenths plus 30 hundredths. Now the trick is, I know that I cannot add my fractions unless they have the same denominator. And I see here that my denominators are not the same. So how do I make them the same? Well, I do exactly what we just did in our equivalent fractions. So I know that to get from 10 to 100, I need to multiply by 10. If I multiply 10 by 10, that gives me 100. And whatever I do to the bottom, I also have to do to the top. 2 times 10 is 20. So now that these denominators are equivalent, I can add these fractions. So 20 plus 30 is 50. And I know that when I add fractions, I keep my denominator the same. So there's our first example. Let's do another one. Let's go ahead and do 4 tenths plus, let's go 19 hundredths. And what are we going to get? Well, first step, 10 and 100 are not the same denominator. So what I need to do is I actually need to make those denominators the same. So how I'm going to do that is I'm going to do 10 times 10, which gives me 100. There we go. We have the same denominator. Whatever I do to the bottom, I also have to do to the top. So I know if I multiply 4 by 10, that gives me 40. Now I can add these together. 40 plus 19 equals 59, and I keep my denominator the same, and I get 59 over 100. That's my answer. So we're going to do one more practice just to make sure that we've got this down. So last one, we're going to do 8/10 plus 15 100ths. Well, I can't add these together yet because my denominators are not the same. So how do I make the denominators the same? Well, I can use my zeros trick. 10 times 10 gives me 100. 8 times 10 gives me 80. Now I can add these up. 80 plus 15 is 95. And I keep my denominator the same. 95 over 100 is my final answer. Okay, I'm going to write this down for you. Here's your homework after watching this video. You're going to make up 5 addition problems using tenths and hundredths, just like we just did. You're not going to do 5 regular addition problems. You want to make sure that your addition problems are 1 is tenths and 1 is hundredths, and you're going to have to make them equivalent. Then you can do the challenge question. And here is your challenge question. If you want to do this on a lined piece of paper, that would be great. Here's your challenge. 6/10 plus what is going to give me 82 hundredths? If you can figure that out, I want you to take a picture of your work and send it to me. And hopefully this video helped with just a little bit of review. What we're going to go into after this is actually learning about decimals. We're going to learn about decimals for the first time, so that's really, really exciting.